Welcome to the Formula Bolen F1 Show's 2022 Singapore Grand Prix recap. I'm Jared Borislow, but you can call me J-Bone. And yes, I am wearing 3 t-shirts right now. You'll find out why later. Let's get into it, folks. J-Bone! First up, on my Singapore Grand Prix preview episode, I gave you 3 storylines to follow throughout the race weekend. Let's see how those shaped up. The first storyline was, will Max Verstappen win the Singapore Grand Prix and increase his current Grand Prix winning streak to 6 and win the World Drivers' Championship in Singapore? And he did exactly 0 of those things. Max very well may have done the first 2, though, if not for one of the biggest storylines of the entire Singapore Grand Prix race weekend, Max's bizarre Q3 in qualifying. Max Verstappen was almost certainly going to be on pole position in Singapore until he aborted his final flying lap in Q3, literally right at the end of it. It looked like Max was about to take pole at the end of qualifying, but instead of making his way toward the checkered flag at the end of his final flying lap, he turned into the pit lane and had all of us scratching our heads. What happened was that Max had made a mistake at turn 16 on his second to last flying lap and made the decision himself to abort that lap because he had previously been told by the Red Bull pit wall that he would have time to get one more lap in at the end. And while he did end up having time for one more lap, it turned out he didn't have something else that is needed for one more lap, and that is fuel. All cars are required by the sporting regulations to have at least 1 liter of fuel in them at the end of qualifying for post-race scrutineering purposes, and Red Bull realized during Max's final flying lap that if Max were to finish that lap and then complete his requisite in-lap, he might not have that required 1 liter of fuel left. Now, the penalty for not having that 1 liter of fuel would be starting from the pit lane. So Red Bull decided better safe than sorry and told Max to abort his flying lap, locking him in to P8 on the starting grid. The reason Max was so pissed over team radio after being told to box and throw away in almost certain pre-scrutineering pole position is that he didn't know about any potential fuel issue until after qualifying, as last he heard from the pit wall, he was good to go for that final lap. And the kicker here is that it looks as if Max's second to last flying lap, the one that he made the mistake at turn 16 on and then aborted, may have been enough for pole position if he had just finished it. About this, Max said, quote, "I was on for a good lap when I aborted before starting the last lap. It might have been pole. In hindsight, we should have finished the penultimate lap. Instead, I had to abort 2 laps, but hindsight is a great thing." End quote. So yeah, just a crazy situation there for Max. If he had just completed that lap that he had made a little mistake on, which he would not have aborted had he not been told, you got time and fuel for 1 more lap, he could have been on pole. But he ended up aborting 2 laps. The funny thing is, back in Belgium, Max only needed 1 lap in Q3 to get pole. So, if only he'd been able to pull that out here. No pun intended. The second storyline was, how will Singapore's weather affect the race weekend? And it affected it a lot. While Friday was dry, Saturday and Sunday were the opposite of dry, which gave us quite a bit of chaos and mayhem. As far as Saturday is concerned, you can argue that the wet weather played a significant role in George Russell not making Q3, the rare sight of 2 AlphaTauris making Q3, and Red Bull's misjudging of Max's fuel situation in Q3 that led to him aborting what would have probably been his pole lap. There was very quickly changing track conditions that led to Red Bull not properly being able to manage their fuel, which caused the aborted lap that I mentioned earlier. As far as the race is concerned, the race start was obviously delayed over an hour due to wet track conditions. Side note, I made a sarcastic joke on Twitter about this delay at Formula Bolen, go toss me a follow, where I said, quote, Delaying the Singapore Grand Prix an hour is a slap in the face to all the American F1 fans who set their alarms and woke up early. Even more evidence that Formula One simply doesn't care about growing the American F1 market /S, end quote. I quickly found out that /S, which denotes a sarcastic joke, must not be universal internet speak, as I had many Europeans respond to that tweet screaming at me about how wrong and how much of a stupid American I am. Lesson learned. Next time I'll just put, I'm being sarcastic. This is sarcastic. Please do not take me seriously. And then I can avoid this whole thing. Anyways, when racing resumed, we were on intermediate tires for the majority of it because even though it hadn't rained for a while before the race finally started, the Singapore Grand Prix takes place on city streets at night, meaning there isn't great drainage nor radiant heat from the sun to help dry the track up. Now, one of the biggest impacts the weather had on the race weekend was that the wet conditions caused DRS to not be enabled until lap 43 of the race. Marina Bay is already a hard circuit at which to overtake, even with DRS, so this made things extra difficult for drivers, even those who started the race far out of position, such as Max Verstappen and George Russell. Although, you won't see the McLarens or Aston Martins complaining about that, of course. The final storyline was, hear me out, do Haas actually have a shot at winning the Singapore Grand Prix? And you should have elected to not hear me out, as they never came close to anything resembling winning the race. K-Mag went full Giga K-Mag and damaged his front wing again. And Mick never got higher than P10. Classic Haas delusion syndrome here, folks. It got me again. It had me dreaming. And I'm sure it's going to do the exact same thing in the near future. Next up, here are some Singapore Grand Prix congratulations that are in order. First up, congratulations to Checo Perez on driving an absolutely mega race and taking home a well-deserved victory. Though I must say, it was extremely stupid that Checo, Red Bull, and race fans around the world could not properly celebrate Checo's win when it happened because of the FIA's dumb decision to investigate his safety car infringement after the race. The FIA should be doing everything in its power to have a race end without any doubt cast on the race winner, and they absolutely failed us all with regard to that on Sunday. There was plenty of time to make a decision on Checo's infringement during the race, and if it's true that the FIA were in fact waiting to see if Checo could build a 5-second gap to Leclerc before deciding whether or not to hand him a 5-second penalty, well, that entirely defeats the purpose of the penalty in the first place, doesn't it? Sheesh, that was annoying. Come on, FIA. Do better. Next up, congratulations to Fernando Alonso on setting a new record for Formula One race starts at 350. 350. That is truly an insane number. Fernando Alonso's first Formula One race start was all the way back in March of 2001, before many Formula Bone F1 show viewers were even born. What an insane career. Next up, congratulations to George Russell for continuing my favorite streak in Formula One. George Russell set the fastest lap in Singapore on his way to finishing the race, P14. This marks the third Singapore Grand Prix in a row where the winner of the fastest lap award didn't finish in the top 10, which is just inspiration to back markers everywhere. And finally, congratulations to Daniel Ricciardo on an incredible race that saw him go from P16 all the way up to P5, his best finish of the season so far. If Checo hadn't had an almost flawless race victory, Daniel certainly would have won Driver of the Day. Because he didn't win it, though, I'm going to instead bestow upon him the title of Driver of G'day, because he had a phenomenal drive and also he's Australian. This episode of the Formula Bowen F1 Show is brought to you by Felix Gray Glasses. The good folks at Felix Gray create effective, research-backed products to improve humans' relationships with technology. About 6 years ago, Felix Gray set out to create eyewear that would make it easier and more comfortable for humans to stare at screens because we all live in a digital world now, and that means we are forced to look at screens, and more screens all day, every day. And the thing about all these screens is that they are wreaking havoc on our eyeballs and brains and causing things like eye strain, headaches, and blurry vision. The blue light emitted from these screens is the culprit, and Felix Gray's clear blue light lenses filter 15 times more blue light than other clear lenses. 9 out of 10 Felix Gray customers experience relief from eye strain, headaches, and/or blurry vision, and Felix Gray Glasses don't just do a great job protecting your eyes and brain from the evil of screens, they're also incredibly high quality and built to last. Their best sellers are their clear blue light glasses, which are available in both prescription and non-prescription, but Felix Gray also has amber blue light glasses and sunglasses, which I'm currently wearing, that I also love, and you will too. Check out Felix Gray's full selection at felixgrayglasses.com/fbone, where you'll have access to free shipping, free returns, and free exchanges for a completely risk-free shopping experience. You have nothing to lose, folks. That's FELIXGRAY glasses.com/FBONE. There's a link for that deal in the description of this episode. It's now time to check in with you all regarding how my 3 bona fide race predictions fared at the Singapore Grand Prix. And folks, oh no. My first race prediction was that Max Verstappen would win the Singapore Grand Prix, but not be crowned World Drivers' Champion in Singapore. Checo obviously won the race, not Max, but Max was not crowned World Drivers' Champion in Singapore just like I predicted. So I will be awarding myself a half point for my efforts, and thus will be celebrating with a half J-bone. J-ba! My second race prediction was that the podium at the Singapore Grand Prix would feature 1 Ferrari, 1 Red Bull, and 1 Mercedes. And it featured 1 Ferrari, 1 Red Bull, and another Ferrari. Now, rather than accepting defeat here, I will instead be awarding myself 2/3 of a point for my efforts of getting the Ferrari and the Red Bull correct, and thus will be celebrating with 2/3 of a J-bone. J-bone! My third and final race prediction was that at least one Haas car would finish in the points at the Singapore Grand Prix, and neither of them did. So I will be celebrating with 0% of a J-bone. Going 1.166666, repeating of course, for 3 on my bona fide race predictions is pretty bad, okay? It's pretty bad. But you know what's not bad? Going 3 for 3, and that is precisely what I will be doing with my upcoming Japanese Grand Prix bona fide race predictions later this week. So make sure you toss me a subscription so you can hear those right when they drop, because you're going to want to hear them, folks. J-bone! There's a full J-bone for you. I know, I was kind of teasing you guys with the half and the 2/3. Had to give you a full one. Next up, it's time to respond to some Singapore Grand Prix themed voicemails left by Formula Bowen F1 show viewers on the Bowen phone. If you're new to the Formula Bowen F1 show, welcome. After every race this season, I do one of these race recap episodes, and a large part of them is me responding to questions, comments, hot takes, and more left by Formula Bowen F1 show listeners on the Bowen phone, the phone number for which is 1-833-200-0966. Add it to your speed dial. And if you live somewhere where it is difficult to make phone calls, I've also created a channel in the Formula Bowen Discord server where you can submit voice memos directly from your phone rather than calling the hotline number. Check it out via the Discord invite link in the description of this episode. Also, just join the Formula Bowen Discord anyways because it's fun. We're almost at 800 members of the Bowen Brigade. We talk F1 in there. We have a good time. Come join the community. Link in the description of this episode. So during or after each race, whenever you have an interesting thought, hot take, complaint, or anything else like that, make sure to hit up the Bowen phone or the Formula Bowen Discord for a chance at your voicemail being played on the show. Without further ado, here's the first call.
Hey J-Bone, do you think that this race was the best race of the season. With everything that happened and then the delayed start and everything that was going on, do you think that this was better than the British Grand Prix? I feel like the Singapore Grand Prix and the British Grand Prix have been the best races so far this year.
While this was a solid race that featured a lot of chaos, and you all know how I like chaos, for me, personally, it still pales in comparison to the British Grand Prix. Checo took the lead in Singapore before turn 1 and never gave it up. And call me a simpleton, but for me personally, for a race to be in the running for Race of the Year, it has to have a solid battle for P1. And the British Grand Prix had exactly that, with it looking like Max, Lewis, Leclerc, and Sainz were all going to win at different points in the race. We also, at the British Grand Prix, got an all-time battle at Silverstone that featured one of the most legendary Crofty calls of all time. And through goes Hamilton! And, Hamilton wasn't through for very long, but it was still an awesome call. So yeah, the British Grand Prix is still my race of the year, but I hope it isn't by the end of the season, because that would mean that we're going to get at least one incredible race before the 2022 season comes to a close. Next call.
J-Bone. What is your opinion on Mercedes and why did they look so strong in FP1 and qualifying, but when it came to the race, they fell apart very quickly? And do you think Lewis Hamilton has a chance to win at least one of the races in the next upcoming 5? J-Bone!
I believe Mercedes struggled to score many points in Singapore because of what's been one of their biggest issues all season long, and that is getting temperature into their tires. Mercedes struggle for tire temperature during dry daytime races, so a wet nighttime qualifying and wet nighttime race are not what they want when they're trying to score maximum points, okay? And as far as whether or not I think Lewis will be able to win at least one race before the season ends, I think he's still got a chance, and I hope he does just to spice things up. But I don't think he will because none of the upcoming circuits seem to suit the Mercedes car's strengths nor its weaknesses very well. So, could be a Lewis Hamilton winless season. Remains to be seen. Next call.
Hey J-Bone, it's Rayon from Canada. During the battle between Russell and Schumacher, we actually heard the commentators say that defending from Mick is like him trying to prove his place in F1. I want to know your thoughts on this. Do you think he's going to be in F1 next year?
There are currently 3 2023 Formula One seats left to fill. There's Fernando Alonso's vacant seat at Alpine now that he's moving to Aston Martin, Nicholas Latifi's vacant seat at Williams, and Mick's current seat at Haas. My initial prediction is that Pierre Gasly will be filling that vacant Alpine seat, meaning that there will instead then be an open AlphaTauri seat that needs filling along with that Williams seat and that Haas seat. And what I've decided to do from there is just go all in on Indy 500 winner and former F1 driver Marcus Ericsson's silly season predictions that have been 100% correct thus far. So I believe, as Ericsson believes, that Schumacher goes to AlphaTauri, Danny Rick goes to Haas, and Nick DeVries goes to Williams. Even if Ericsson ends up being wrong, which he hasn't been wrong yet, so who's to say he's going to start now, I do see Mick remaining on the grid next season. The development and the moments of promise that he's shown this season, as well as, to be frank, his last name, should still make Mick Schumacher an enticing enough option for teams for him to keep a seat somewhere on the grid. Okay, listen up, Bone Brigade. I just did a massive Formula Bone merch drop filled with custom designs straight from the brain of J-Bone that I think you're going to love, and that ship globally. I ship around the globe. Wherever you live, I ship. Let me quickly run you through Formula Bone merch drop round 1, and yes, this is why I'm wearing 3 shirts right now. First, there's probably my favorite design of the whole bunch, Donka Seb, available on a shirt like the one I'm currently wearing, and a coffee mug. It is the unofficial design of saying bye to Inspector Seb because we are all going to miss this legendary 4-time world champion and professional scooterer. Next up, there's the long-awaited DRS chicken design, available on a shirt like the one I'm wearing, and a coffee mug. Remember those Max vs. Charles Leclerc DRS detection line games of chicken? I know, it feels like forever ago. Well, for some reason, I decided to imagine what DRS chicken would look like if it were a fried chicken restaurant, and the rest is history. And lastly, self-loathing fans of a certain American Formula One team, this design is for you. Meet Pain F1 Team, the most disappointing yet hope-inspiring F1 team ever created, available on a shirt like the one I'm now wearing, and also a hat, which I've been wearing the whole episode, as well as a coffee mug. And of course, I also have a few pieces of Formula Bone-themed merch in the shop as well. I currently offer global shipping to over 50 countries and territories, and if your country isn't currently eligible for shipping, shoot me a DM and I'll work it out. When you buy Formula Bone merch, you are directly supporting Formula Bone financially and J-Bone's career and making it so that I can keep making Formula One content. So I really, really appreciate the support, folks. J-Bone! Next call.
J-Bone with Charles and Checo fighting right now for P2 in the championship. Do you think that maybe George Russell could get in on that action? Maybe take P2 himself or take P3 from like Charles or Checo?
Given the races we have left, I don't see George Russell outscoring Charles Leclerc and Checo by enough to take P2 in the World Drivers' Championship. And honestly, at this point, I'm not even totally sure he'll finish ahead of Carlos Sainz in P4. I mean, he's literally only 1 point ahead of Sainz right now after the Singapore Grand Prix. And sure, Sainz isn't driving very well compared to Leclerc at the moment, but Sainz does have a great car, and that car should suit a lot of the upcoming circuits better than George's should. If I had to guess, though, I would say that George Russell ends the season P4 ahead of Sainz and behind Checo, meaning Leclerc will take P2. Final call.
Hey J-Bone, now that Max has been denied the early championship in Singapore, do you think that the possibility of him winning it early at any of the upcoming races is still there or essentially gone because of today's result? J-Bone!
I firmly believe that Max Verstappen will be crowned 2022's World Drivers' Champion in Japan this weekend, which, as Checo has pointed out, would be very meaningful to Red Bull's engine partner Honda, which is based in Japan. All Max needs to do in Japan to ensure he's crowned the 2022 World Drivers' Champion is win the race with the fastest lap. That is it. If Max does that, there's nothing Leclerc can do to stop him. Max can also win the race without the fastest lap and still be crowned champion, as long as Leclerc finishes lower than P2, and there are also a ton of additional ways that Max can be crowned champion in Japan that all require him to score at least 8 points more than Leclerc and at least 6 points more than Checo. If Max is crowned champion this weekend, it'd make him just the third driver ever, alongside Michael Schumacher and Sebastian Vettel, to win the World Drivers' Championship with 4 races remaining, and I think he does it. That's it for today's episode of the Formula Bone F1 show. If you want to support Formula Bone and are able to, I'd really appreciate it if you bought a piece of Formula Bone merch available now on bolenmedia.com/shop. I've placed a link to the Formula Bone shop in the description of this episode. And if you're looking for a free way to support Formula Bone, just toss the YouTube video of this episode a like and my YouTube channel a subscription, so that the YouTube algorithm likes me more and shows me to more people. For Formula One updates between now and my Japanese Grand Prix preview episode later this week, you can join over 700 members, almost 800 members, of the Bone Brigade in the Formula Bone Discord server via the invite link in the description of this episode. You can also follow me on all social media at Formula Bone and at my real name, Jared Borislow. That's at JARED. BORISLOW. Until next time, folks, J-Bone!